Well, welcome everyone. All of those here present and all of those who are present through the live stream. My name is Father Charles Trujillos. I'm the director of the Catholic Information Center, a great place for intellectual discussions and spiritual discussions, and also a place where all of you who are around the country, when you come to Washington, D.C., you can visit the Catholic Information Center, and we have the sacraments, daily mass, confessions, and many other things. But today, we have a great panel, and we are going to talk about holy ambition, thriving as a Catholic woman at work and at home. And I wanted to introduce first the three panelists here. Elise Crawford Gallagher. She is a wife and a mother of two little girls, and she is the chief operating officer of her family business, JD Law, a regional criminal and domestic law firm based in Baltimore, but they have also offices in Virginia and Pennsylvania. But before that, Elise founded and was the CEO of Ringlet, a marketing agency focused on serving women-owned businesses. And Elise built this organization from a one-woman show to a very thriving 8 people organization. And then Ringlet produced national and multi-level campaigns for startups around the country. Now, in 2018, Elise founded Catholic Women in Business, a resource and online community of over 7,000 working women. And through all their, podcasts and blogs and events, and they helped, or they are helping so many people, so many women in this area to work with Christ and having in mind the vocation that God has given us, especially to be saints. Then we have Elizabeth Marcolini. She is the CEO of Rose Roofing and Restoration, a high-growth construction company that has doubled in size every year since they started. And she went to the University of Dallas, great university, and then she earned a master's in theological studies from the John Paul II Institute. And then she resides in Virginia with her husband and 3 children. And she's also the co-author of the Pocket Guide to the Works of Mercy that was just published by Ascension Press, and was released this week. Regina Bethencourt is the founder of Tenuto, a marketing agency that helps businesses with brand development, website design, and marketing strategy. She started her career first in public relations, working with clients in real estate and luxury remodeling. And she has also served as the director of marketing and communications for a nonprofit focused on supporting professional women. Now, after the birth of her first child, and now they have 5, correct? So she saw, and her husband also saw, how challenging it was, right? To be a mother, and at the same time having a intense work schedule. So her company is focused also on allowing flexible schedules and for all, to facilitate working women, to have their families and also be great professionals. And she lives in Alexandria in Virginia with her family. And with this, please help me welcome the 3 panelists. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Okay, Is the microphone sound good? You can all hear us. Okay, thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to see all of your faces. I was telling Father Charles earlier that I'm so grateful to the Catholic Information Center for all of its ministries. I was a Leonine Fellow in 2019, and I really feel that the Catholic Information Center was the place where my faith as a young professional really took root. From attending events hosted by Helena Vare to all that I learned through the Leonine Forum. I'm very grateful to be hosting tonight. So thank you so much, Father. Thank you so much. Please come on in. I'm so grateful to be here tonight to talk about holy ambition, thriving as a Catholic woman at home and at work. This has been a dream a few years in the making. I want to shout out my co-author, Taryn DeLong, who couldn't be with us tonight, but I know she's watching online. And she did a tremendous amount co-authoring this book with me. So I'm very grateful to her, as well as the two lovely ladies who are sitting next to me. I've known Regina for about 15 years. We went to the Catholic University together and studied philosophy together. And then Elizabeth and I have been friends for almost 10 years at this point, and have journeyed in entrepreneurship together. So thank you both for being here. This book was published last year in October of 2024, and throughout the writing process, I reflected a lot on how I got here. How did I get to the point where I was writing this book as a Catholic professional woman about the integration of faith and family life? And nothing happens in a vacuum in our faith, right? This book didn't just come out of thin air. The idea didn't come out of thin air. It is an accumulation of years of experience and prayer and thought. And I wanted to pinpoint a certain time in our church's history tonight to begin our conversation, to really reflect on where, for me, my thoughts and prayers of what it means to be a Catholic working woman really came from and stems from. And that year was 1962. It was a very exciting year in our church's history. Not only was my mother, who I know is watching online, hi Mom, was born in 1962 in August, but a couple of my family's patron saints had big years in 1962. Saint Gianna Molla passed away in April of 1962. She was a mother who sacrificed her life for her fourth child. And then in October of 1962, Pope John XXIII started the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council, why is that relevant to us now in 2025? Well, I want to read a quote from John XXIII and what he had to say about the need for this ecumenical council. The function of every ecumenical council has always been to make a solemn proclamation of the union that exists between Christ and his church, to diffuse the light of truth, to give right guidance to men, both as individuals and as members of a family and a society, to evoke and strengthen their spiritual resources, and to set their minds continually on those higher values which are genuine and unfailing. The major interest of the Ecumenical Council is this: that the sacred heritage of Christian truth be safeguarded and expounded with great efficiency. And I hope to do that here tonight, not only through our book, Holy Ambition, but through this conversation and expanding upon the truth of Jesus Christ, who he is in our world, and what it means as Catholic women to live out the truth of our church, to live out the truth of Jesus and his ministry. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our conversation. I wanted to start off with something very tangible. I think in these conversations, it's easy for us to be esoteric, and I love talking about philosophy with these ladies. So the first question I'm going to ask them is to tell us a little bit more about themselves and about a day in their life, what their day-to-day looks like, and I'll go last. I'll wrap up. Do you want to go start, Elizabeth? You start off.
My goodness. I am a mom of 3 little kids. Our kids' ages are 3, 2, and 1. So a lot of days it feels like I have triplets. Our first two were adopted miraculous gifts, and I was holding our 6-month-old, and after 7 years, found out we were pregnant. So God is so good and so generous, and I feel like I live that every day in my motherhood when I look at my kids. So that's the first thing I like to share is the closest to my heart. I've been married to the most amazing man in the world. We met at the top of an Irish castle, true story. And I am the CEO of a construction company. I never had that in my, when you're in like 5th grade and you're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't think it was the CEO of a roofing company. But what I do love, we're a very fast-growing company. We're in 5 states. We are over 125 people. We're an 8-figure business, and I truly could never have told you that 6 years ago that that's where we would be. So it is truly the glory of God that we are where we are. But I feel very passionately in caring for the people who work for us. We give formation courses to our employees, trying to kind of direct them to the good. We always say it's like pre-Christian evangelization. And the philosopher roofer is a term we throw around a lot. So that's my work life. My daily life, I get up in the morning, take care of my kids, get them dressed, feed them breakfast. I check my email normally before I get them up, try to get a little bit of work in. I start the day with rosary. Normally, Matt and I try to say it at breakfast before he goes to work with the kids. He leaves for work, and then our family assistant gets there. We call her that because she truly is not just kind of helping with the kids. My kind of philosophy as a working mom is that if there's anything that she could be doing that would take me away from the kids, I want her doing it, not me. So laundry, she takes care of that, like tidying, things like that. And when I'm present with my kids, I want to be present with them. So I'm very protective of that time, and having another pair of hands is really critical to me in my day-to-day. I'm in the office 2 days a week. We have an office about 20 minutes away from our house. The other 3 days a week, I work from home. I put our kids down and then normally do a little bit of work, but my phone turns into a brick at about 9 p.m. And then that's really sacred time with Matt. So that's my day.
Okay, so I'm Regina. I have 5 kids. My husband's in the back with our 5th, who we brought along tonight. And my kids Inez is in the back. She's 6 months old, and my oldest is 10. And I have just about every 2 to 3 years in between there. So, but I started my company after working in the PR world, just in a boutique, regular PR firm, and just saw how women who decided to have children were treated in that environment. One colleague in particular got pregnant with her first baby, and just had to work these long, grueling hours, pregnant, and just with very little empathy or sympathy for anyone else on staff. They would say things to her like, well, you knew what you were signing up for, right? When you decided to do this. And it's just, she was sort of left to manage it on her own. And then coming back, from maternity leave, there's nothing illegal done, right? You can't fire somebody for having a baby, but there's little things that you can do just to make life a little bit more harder, and to make someone, maybe the clients they're on are a little less prestigious, things like that. And I was just seeing how this toxic behavior in the workplace, and this was before I got married, before I had kids, and I just thought, I don't want to live my motherhood and go through this myself. So I pulled back from the workforce, thinking, okay, maybe I'll just be a stay-at-home mom. But I just felt this deep professional calling to really use my skills and talents in the professional world. So I started freelancing. My skills are really kind of in the communications marketing space. I started freelancing there, and then just realized there's so much work, and that little, voice of God, right, comes into your head and says, what if you can provide opportunities for other women to be able to have jobs that really support the family life they want to have? So the work was coming in. I thought, okay, here we go. I'm going to start building this more out in a company format. I started hiring some people, and we've grown since then. We're now 7 employees, all moms, and all in different stages of motherhood. So some are like Elizabeth, who have 3 under 3, and some are in the, they're a little bit older. Their youngest kid might be 6, 7 years old. And they're in this stage of parenting where all the kids are in school all day, so they have this time, but then really want to be home with their kids after 3 o'clock when the kids come home from school. So we built the company kind of as we were going, because I didn't feel like I had all the answers when it comes to how do you actually work in a flexible way that provides moms with this opportunity to be able to be with their kids the way they want to, but then the work gets done, and the work gets done really well. And that has been a massive challenge, and I've learned so much over the past 5 years of building the company. The big overall goal is that we can kind of get this down so that we can inspire a movement, inspire other employers to say, okay, we really can do this, right? You can offer a way to work that works for women and mothers. But my day-to-day life, so how do I manage this with 5 kids and running a business? I mean, I'll give you a snapshot of what a day might look like, right? But part of this kind of life, as I'm sure you ladies would agree with me, is that every day you just have to be ready to roll with the punches, right? Because you have this beautiful day planned out, and you're ready, and you drink your cup of coffee, and somebody throws up, and it's all out the window, right? So, in an ideal day, right? We're parishioners at St. Rita. That's where my kids go to school. So my older ones go there. I have my baby with me. After 10 years of working with babies, I find it very easy to work with a baby. It's actually the easiest kid I have. So she's just, she can't move. She can't, get away from me. So I can be there on my computer. I can nurse my baby. And so I'm with her 3 days a week. And then I have my 2-year-old home with me 2 days a week. And then I also, a big piece of this whole thing is how do you keep, in this world where we're so connected, we're on our phones all the time, how do you keep the children from being raised by a mother who's just with the phone in her face constantly? So a big thing we like to do is also this like phone bricking thing, right? Is like my kids are home from school at 3:30 and the phone is gone, right? The work, if there's something that happens, it waits until 7 o'clock when the phone becomes back on because the kids are in bed, right? Yeah, that's an ideal day.
Great. Thank you both. So just to give my own little rendition. So I started Ringlet, my first business, in 2018. I had been working for the USCCB in the pro-life office and also working for a boutique PR agency up in New York, and decided to really settle down in the DC area. And I saw that there was a growth of women-owned small businesses who didn't have access to great marketing. So Ringlet, I grew that with my business co-founder, Claire Conway, who's also a graduate of CUA. We grew that to about 8 employees and worked with hundreds of Catholic and non-Catholic business owners across the US. It was great fun. We had investors towards the end who were great to work with. And in 2022, I had my second, Amelia, and we moved up to Baltimore so that my husband could start his legal career with my family, JC Law. And during that time, it was we're going to talk about discernment a lot today, but it was a really pivotal moment in my career where I loved Ringlet. I had grown it over 6 or 7 years, and we had great employees and great experience, but I could feel the Lord calling me to a next chapter. So at the end of 2022, we closed Ringlet, and I started working with my family firm, JC Law. I had purposefully not gone to law school so that I would not become a lawyer and work with lawyers. And now I run a business with about 50 lawyers across 3 different states, which is it is a lot of fun. My husband Hunter and I work together on a day-to-day basis, which has also been a learning curve, but really filled with a lot of grace. And as Father said, we have two littles, Rosemary and Amelia. On a day-to-day basis, what that looks like is I'm in office Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, and then I work from home Tuesdays and Thursdays. Rosemary and Amelia started pre-K about a couple of weeks ago at our local parochial school, which is a great blessing. It's a great community. But it is a tremendous daily grind. And I think us ladies and our husbands were talking about it before this conversation, that there is a lot of grace and in hard work. And we are learning that on a day-to-day basis. So I wear a lot of different hats at JC Law. I am technically COO, but I also dabble in HR, operations. I cannot get legal advice, so I don't do that. But other than that, I am helping run our day-to-day operations across our 3 states. So that's a little bit about me. And I guess after I get the girls off to school, I do start the day with coffee, which we got a new coffee machine back in December, an espresso machine. It was a great investment. I highly recommend it. I get the girls off to school. Hunter usually walks them to school by 8:20, and then it is off to the races. Hunter and I get on our calls with our employees. We usually have a team meeting around 8:45 with the whole company. We're up to about 85 employees right now. And then I have meetings after meetings after meetings. So it is a lot of making sure that lawyers are doing what they're supposed to do, teams are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I work with our legal team, but also our admin team. We're a really unique law firm in that half of our firm is admin. Most law firms, admin takes up about 10% of the firm, and we're at 50%, which is allowing us to grow, but it requires a lot of oversight. I usually get lunch, which is I think you guys can relate, usually a luxury if I get to go out and get myself lunch on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And then the afternoon's filled with meetings, and I usually try to leave by 5. I do have a nanny who's been with us for a few years. She is also transitioning to more of a family assistant, and that she's helping with laundry and pickup and all of the day-to-day things that need to get done in a home when parents aren't there. And then I try to be home by 6 o'clock. We have family dinner time. Really try to stay off those phones. I have to say, law firms, there are clients don't care what time it is. So they are calling at all times. That has been a challenge to navigate that. The girls are usually in bed around 8 o'clock. And then because I'm expecting in January, I pass out right after them. So that concludes our night. But thank you, ladies, for sharing that day today. I want to start off our conversation with, if you guys could talk about I talked about a major point of discernment in my career. If you guys could share a point of discernment in your own careers, how you went through that discernment, who you went through it with, and how you came out the other side.
I would say a big point of discernment for me as I was building the company was hiring my first full-time employee. I had worked with some contractors before when I would have too much work, so I'd pull in some contractors and they would kind of help me with overflow work. But that was easy because I can pay a contractor when I have sort of an overflow of work and then of revenue. But if I hire someone, I'm committing to them, right? And I'm committing to saying, here's where you're going to get your paycheck. And then I have to run payroll, and I'm responsible for someone's livelihood. And it's a very big responsibility, and it's very, running payroll every 2 weeks as an employer is, you just feel the weight of of what you're doing and all the decisions you're making. You know, if you lead the company wrong, or you start to lose revenue for whatever reason, you'd have to have conversations with people like, you're no longer going to have your livelihood that you depend on. So that for me was it took me a while to say, okay, I'm ready for this. And I think sometimes, obviously, you're building this with the idea, which is a goal of mine, is that I'm building alongside God. I'm building because this is something that God has put on my heart, and I feel, that that's what I want, is to, do the will of God. So you have that, with you, I guess, giving you the strength to make the decisions you need to. But there is an element of, you kind of have to jump off the cliff. I think it was your husband that was talking about jumping off the cliff ahead of this, where you have to trust and you have to go for it, right? Because you can sit in discernment for a very long time, hoping that you'll get this, really clarifying answer and this guarantee. And you're never going to get that. And I think, a big part of that discernment process is when to decide it's over, and when to decide you take the leap and say, no, I'm committing to this, and I'm going to do everything I can to run that payroll. And we've run payroll ever since. We've never had to skip. So here we are.
I'm cracking up as you say that. Matt always says that you'll never get a bigger rush in life than right before you process a payroll. And that is so true. When you're an entrepreneur and you're growing a company, it is a huge responsibility that you feel. I think in terms of discernment, I have to give so much credit, and you're going to hear me talk about my husband, who I love so much, a lot during this talk. We started Rose together with our brother-in-law, and he really is the impetus and reason behind this idea. He was passionate about the blue collar space. And so we went in together and built the company. I always say that I'm a pretty good fire, but he is like the match. He needs to, so in a certain sense, it's like kindling, right? I think that I would have been the sort of person that would have been in discernment for a long time about making a choice without Matt. And so, if you're listening to this or thinking or have something in your heart to start something, like we did, you're a discerner, find someone who's more of a match. I also think too that in my life, I would agree with you. Actually, it's funny. I was thinking hiring employees is always a huge measure of discernment. I would say too, from a culture standpoint. Every person, on our team, I want to be additive to culture. And I personally interview a lot of our leadership. It becomes a funny thing. We've experienced this year, where there's so many people in our company that I don't personally know anymore. And as a leader, that's been really strange for me, because we lived so many years where I knew every single sales rep, and I even knew a lot of our clients. And now the leadership impact, the person you trained is now training 2 layers down, and you feel like culturally you have to really hold on to kind of your values, the way you operate as a team. So that's something I've been reflecting on a lot this year, and just the discernment of leadership and forming my leaders really well at the top to make sure they're setting a good precedent.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to talk a little bit about ongoing discernment. I think I'm a little bit more of the match. Hunter is also more the person I think who would keep discerning. I think as entrepreneurs, we just kind of like leap. That's my more natural inclination. But it has been a continual discernment as a couple to decide to take on this huge responsibility of running a company together. It is my father and my mom's company. I watched them grow it as I grew up. And there's a big element of transition between one generation to the next. And to think that what they built over 35 years is now going to be resting on our shoulders is a lot. And so we are discerning that of, okay, Lord, are you still calling us to this? Is this still the jobs that you want us to be taking on, the mountain that you want us to be climbing. And I have to say, when I talk to young women about their careers and making choices in their careers, I have never received that aha moment about my business or career. I really wish I could say there was a moment where God spoke to me about my job or business and said, like, yep, hire that person, or yes, make that change. And it just, I've had moments of peace and moments of clarity, but a lot of discernment, especially in my professional life I've experienced, is taking that leap of faith and trusting that, Lord, if I'm making the wrong decision, if there's somewhere else you'd like me to go, you're going to have to make it very clear that I'm supposed to be going in another direction. So I'm going to change the conversation a little bit and talk about ambition. So the book is titled Holy Ambition. What does ambition mean? Taryn and I really discerned and talked a lot about the title of this book. The book started off as an idea of Taryn's to talk about Eva Stein and feminine genius and how that applies to the young professional Catholic woman. And Ave Maria Press actually said, okay, we want to make it a little more broad. How can we talk about different topics that women in the professional world as Catholics are asking themselves? We run Catholic Women in Business together, Taryn and I, and so over the years, we have heard these questions that are listed in the book. There's 8 questions that we address over and over again. And one of the questions we hear often is, as a Catholic woman, am I allowed to be ambitious? What does that mean? I think when we hear the word ambition, we think of the secular version of that, which means I'm going to be, chasing money, chasing power. And as Catholics, we interpret ambition differently, right? We interpret ambition as to mean accomplishing the will of God. So as women, what does ambition mean to you? How have you guys encountered your own ambition, kind of discerned that and lived that out in your own careers?
I have an image in my office of Jesus walking on the water, and it's just a little watercolor drawing on my desk. And I'm reminded every day that has been my personal invitation in entrepreneurship. In the same way, I feel in motherhood that the Lord has called me to perfect so many failings. In the same way, I feel that when I go and meet my team. There is so much room for sanctification in the workplace, and there is so much room for it at home. I grew up very impacted, I think, by Jose Maria. And it was such a kind of a language of our home that work is sanctifying. It's meant to, participate in the building of the kingdom of God, to make us holy. This is all, if you're here, that's probably language that is familiar to you. But I think that I feel that I've been invited to live that for me in a way that I don't know I would have been if we hadn't started our own company. I think it just pushed pressure points for me where I was like, I didn't realize that was something that I needed to work on. And so I think in that way, holy ambition in kind of growing ourselves. I know I'm kind of coming at this from the back end, but wait a second. When you're putting yourself in a position where you want to be a saint, that often means it's the path of pain and challenge and adversity, right? I don't think there's any stay-at-home mom, working mom, single woman who doesn't feel that their life has challenges. But I think that that's part of our joyous journey to the cross, is to be changed in the ambition towards it. So I feel that in my work life and at home, that God has invited me closer to Him through all of it. And that's my greatest ambition.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, along those lines, I do think that this is often a topic because, we do think of ambition in this secular way, and we think of it as, especially when it's brought up in the context of motherhood. It's, the conversation is always ambitious women over here and mothers over here. And if there wants to be an ambitious mother, well, this is this whole nother level of super mother who's, flying to Paris and France, and, the kids are in boarding school, and, this is how that happens, which isn't, maybe good for anybody. And there's no other way to marry those two terms. So you need to choose, right? You can follow your ambition, or you can follow this call to motherhood. And that can be very difficult to wrap your mind around as a young woman, especially when you do feel that you are somebody who was given many incredible talents, which can be used in the professional world, right? And I think we need to bring the conversation back to kind of understanding what is ambition, understanding how you can live that out in your professional world, but also in your motherhood, and in a way that, both of those things can be part of fulfilling that ambition that God has put on your heart, right? So ambition as in, trying to get somewhere. Essentially, that's what ambition is, right? So, and God has given us talents. God, gives people talents in places. There's, female neurosurgeons that were given these talents, and they, thank God they went to medical school, and thank God they're using them to help save lives. I mean, this is beautiful, and this is in no way, something that should be detracted from their motherhood if they are also mothers. And then also to look at stay-at-home moms and say, oh, those are women who have rejected ambition, like those are non-ambitious women, is also just devaluing the incredible role that, all of my sisters are stay-at-home moms, and I have very dear friends who have decided that that's what God was calling them to be. And they do it with so much ambition, right? These women are, some are even homeschooling. They've got so much drive and so much energy there to put those two things at odds, or say they're non-ambitious, I think, is really selling it short. So I think we have to think about, how can I be the best mother, best professional? How can I kind of pursue these both things at the same time? How can I work on not letting them compete with one another, but work together towards this big goal, which is, that one day ourselves, our spouses, our children, our employees, we see all of each other again in heaven, right? That's the big goal here. And that, the dream is that we can push all those things into one journey.
Thank you. Yes. One of the words that came up over and over again in writing this book was integration. And I think that's what you're talking about, is it not being two separate things, home and work. And I think we live in a really unique time. I'm very grateful to have grown up in the 90s and have the career opportunities that I have, and I've gone to a great university and gone to, master's degree, and have the professional experiences that I have, that I know that even my mom or grandmother might not have had. So how, in that same vein, there's this war that I feel like is constantly brought up with women. I've come across it as soon as I got pregnant, which is the conversation of stay-at-home mom versus working mom. And this idea that you have to pick a lane. You have to either work at home, you have to either stay at home and you're completely devoted to your kids, or you're a working woman and you leave them at 6 weeks and, never see your kids. But in 2025, as women, as Catholic women, we have so many opportunities to live out the church's view of the feminine genius through our work and through our families. How have you guys worked to achieve that integration? And what challenges have you faced in trying to integrate work and life? Do you want to go, Elizabeth? Yeah.
Is that working? Okay. So I love that you started it out this way by talking about kind of where we are in the great timeline, because I think about my grandma and her experience of raising 12 kids. And can you imagine doing that with no dishwasher? I mean, think about that, right? Like no laundry machine. But even, just our experience of the work of the home, it's so different, even than our grandma, which is not that long ago. So I think that in so many ways we have, there's also an argument to be made that we have all these time-saving devices, but no one has time. That's a topic for another day. But I do think when it comes to this topic, there's so much flexibility in working arrangements now. So many people remote work. So many people start their own companies. So many people can work, hybrid solutions like, Elise and I. And I think that flexibility is a really powerful thing for moms. Even when it comes, I love so much, her mission for helping women in the workplace time-wise. We try to do the same at our office. We have a playroom there. I brought my baby into the office till he was almost a year old. And those are the sort of things we just wanted to normalize in our culture. That if there's a baby crawling under the conference table, we're just going to keep talking. It's okay, And we've realized that as kind of a family-run business, being pro-family gives a lot of people kind of this great love for working at our company. So I do think there are so many more choices. My mom always says this to me. She's like, that option just wasn't available when you were a kid. There wasn't that choice. And so I think that that's a huge part of kind of looking at the layout of the world now. There's a lot more flexibility and dishwashers and laundry machines.
Yes, I hear you on the dishwasher. We're in a kitchen renovation right now, and I currently do not have a dishwasher, so this is a lot of paper plates at my house. I think we're in an exciting time because it really, I think about my own mother, and their choices were a little bit more black and white, right? Every now and then I'll meet a mom who's, 60 in her 60s or 70s, and she was able to do some kind of remote work option. But it was so rare, right? So it had to be a very specific kind of skill that could be done at home. So it was really, you're out of the home, completely gone, 40 to 50 hours a week, or you're completely at home. And those are really the only options. And the exciting part about being alive right now is that we don't, the exciting and difficult part, right, is we don't have a playbook, right? So there's, we're kind of figuring out what does this look like? And how do we make this work in a way that actually works for women? I think there's still, I think companies like yours is absolutely wonderful. I think it's still the minority though, right? The reason that so many women are struggling is that we still are stuck in this 9 to 5, 40 hours a week in the office. I have my neighbor just had a baby, and she's trying so hard, you can see it, to just keep up and look like she can hold on to this image of herself as this professional woman, and she wants to keep the job she had. She wants all this stuff, but she's got this tiny baby. And what it looks like for her is dropping the baby off at daycare at 5:30 in the morning, pumping all day at work, bringing coolers to work so you can bring coolers full of milk so that you can then bring it back home, and then you can bring it to daycare so the baby has milk. And there are so many women that are running this like superhuman level of time and energy to try to do both, because they're working in an environment that's completely it's just not flexing to what they need at all. You might have employers do things like, a breastfeeding room or a pumping room. And, we do have more maternity leave now. So it's moving that direction, but it's just such a drop in the bucket when it comes to what women need. And I could go on about this for hours because this is kind of my thing, but how can we allow babies in the office, right? The biggest thing for mothers and babies is that we have so much research that mothers and babies need to be together, right? We know that this is majorly developmentally important for the baby. We know it's majorly important for the mother. It reduces postpartum depression and anxiety. They're designed to be right next to each other in that first year of life. So why can't it be that we can, bring the baby to the office, right? Well, my baby's here tonight, right? Nobody's even her. Why shouldn't we see babies out and around in the world? And why can't we normalize that? Why can't we normalize, school ends at 3:00, but the workday is from 9 to 5, right? Why can't we normalize that there's a good chunk of people that end work at 2:30? And maybe they work again at night. It's not to say they work less than other people, right? But, these things should be just so much more normal. And we talk about mothers too, but this has a big impact on fathers, right? Fathers who don't want to be the 1950s dad who, has said 3 words to his children in their childhood, right? Fathers want to be integrated too, and we need to give them opportunities to do that. So anyway.
Yeah, thank you. I know we could talk about it forever. I run a law firm, so it's a very traditional professional field. We work in criminal and domestic and civil law, so our lawyers are in court. More than half of our lawyers are women, and as a small firm, it is an employer. It is difficult to be able to provide these newer benefits to employees, such as longer maternity leave. We are a 30-year firm, but we only started growing a few years ago. So we're really navigating how do we, as an employer, give women the ability to be with their babies more. Something we've played around with is having in-office nannies or daycare, or having more flex work. But it takes a lot of work on both the employee and the employer to come up with these creative solutions, because we know that when families thrive, our society thrives, right? Between the 3 of us, I just counted, we have 11 kids. So one of the questions that we talk about in the book is, how do I navigate a career while also being open to life? And I'll share, I am coming off of a unique season of my professional career and family life. I'm expecting my 3rd in January, and I have hyperemesis gravidarum during pregnancy, which means I get very sick. I have to lean on my family and my amazing husband, Hunter, my mom, our extended family tremendously during the first 4 months or so of pregnancy, which obviously changes the way I work. The way that I've worked over the summer during my first trimester was very limited. I had to work from home. I had to have a lot of medical intervention. And that has required us to be very flexible and quick moving in our family life and in my professional career. We talk in Holy Ambition a lot about seasons. When I was in college and first in my career, I thought that I was just going to choose a career path and I would work at a company for 40 years and like our parents' generation did, and that's what I would do. I had no idea that there was going to be so many twists and turns and seasons, and that's very much our feminine genius, right? There's different seasons that we have every month, but throughout our lives, there's going to be times that we're working more, times we're working less. I've been a stay-at-home mom for seasons. I've been a mom who's worked every day in the office. Now we have a hybrid schedule. But all of this to say, how have you all navigated those seasons of having kids, fertility, navigating all of that as a Catholic working woman? Do you want to go first, Elizabeth?
I don't know that there's a perfect answer to this question, because I don't think I've ever met a perfect parent. So I think for us, how we've approached it, I love that word. I think it's seasons, and trying to be merciful with yourself. I think that in an environment where you're trying to serve a lot of people, I always joke that I have 125 children and 3 at home. But it's remembering too, like in my postpartum season, I work from home for six weeks after my maternity leave. And I honestly think I went back to work too soon. But at the time that was the longest I'd ever been away from kind of, the office. And the team, and it was actually really, everything was fine. It's like shocking that you think you're more important than you are, right, in your life. But I think that as moms, maybe we struggle with that more than others, just giving ourselves the room to be present to our kids and to take care of ourselves. But I think in terms of our openness, our story has looked different. And we, our daughter, our first daughter, we were actually foster parents. And a friend of ours told us 2 weeks before our daughter was born that there was a birth mom who wanted to meet us, and she felt inspired by the Holy Spirit that we should meet her. And we did, and 2 weeks later, we were holding our daughter. We did not think that we would become parents that way, but it's a longer, more miraculous story than I can even fit into this moment. But so in our discernment, I think if I could kind of sum it up in our openness to life, it's like the best advice I can give is to open wide your arms to all that God wants to give you and say yes. I think I was terrified as we were driving to the hospital, and I just remember crying and being like, we don't have a crib. We are so not ready for this. Like, everyone has 9 months. I had like 9 days, and I remember Matt looked at me and he was like, "Isn't it great?" And he's right. I could never have written a better story for our family if I had tried in my wildest dreams. But I think that begins with arms wide open and just saying, "Lord, you know so much better than I do." And so I think just, again, trying to be radical in my generosity to the Lord, he has never failed me.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I can't follow that up. Just listen to what Elise said. Yeah, I mean, I think, there's nothing that will humble you more than embracing motherhood. And if you're a professionally driven person, that can be maybe you need an extra dose of humility, and that's why it's harder. But it can be extra humbling because, as a woman going through pregnancy, going through labor and delivery, having a newborn, adjusting to life with a child, the child becomes 2 and then 3, and then every season is something different that you have no idea what you're doing. And then every child you have has a different personality. So you thought you had it down with child number 1, and then child number 2 doesn't do the same things as child number 1. And you have to go back to some parenting book and figure out, what am I going to do with this kid? And every baby, there's a saying, my husband's from Venezuela, and there's a saying in Spanish that says every baby comes with a loaf of bread under their arm. And there is so much truth to that. And I just love what you were saying of like, be open to what God wants to give you, because I think sometimes we try to control and we say, I can have 2 kids because this is my plan. I can afford 2 daycares and this is what I'm going to do. And that way everything will work out perfectly so that, I can have enough money and here and there. And we have our big enough house and, I only have 2 bedrooms. So this is what, and we just sit there and we do all these things. And we think what we're doing is setting ourselves up for success. And what we're doing is we're limiting the joy and the love and the gifts that God wants to give us, right? So saying like, I know that what you give me is so much more than my little brain can possibly figure out for myself, that I'm gonna let it go and be open to that. And we roll with the punches, and I wouldn't have thought 10 years ago I'd be sitting here with 5 children, and here we are. And I couldn't imagine anything else. I'm so glad. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Oh, those were beautiful words. Thank you both, ladies. I know we're supposed to leave time for Q&A, and I just realized we're getting to 8:00. So I want to. Sure, I want to leave just a little bit of time. Okay. Thank you.
We can have some conversations during happy hour. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies, for your talk. My question for you, and whoever wants to answer, is what do you do when a colleague or maybe a boss or maybe a spouse, maybe not a spouse, let's say colleague, kind of puts you down because you're a woman? Like, oh no, you can't go tonight and speak somewhere, right? You're supposed to be home. You're supposed to be putting the kids to bed, right? What do you do when, I mean, you know that quote that someone else's, actions or whatever they say to me can't make me ugly, but what do you do to counter that?
Great question.
Oh man, that's tough. First of all, I'm sorry if that has happened to you. I know if that were to happen to me, I've had a lot of things said to me about work for sure. If you're asking about like going to an event, or maybe I'll take a step back and answer it more broadly. When people have kind of said things to Matt or actually Matt probably gets it more than I do. Comments about, I don't know if that's true for both of you, but comments about me working or being his boss. And it's unconventional. And in the Catholic world, I get that. I recognize that. He's always like my number one defender. And he's like, yeah, best boss I could ever have. Like, so we kind of try to turn it into a joke. I'd say that's number one. Just be like, I don't know, try to find humor. Or I always think about Meg Ryan and You've Got Mail, and she's like, I just wish I had the perfect response. So if there's something in particular you're thinking of, try to think about how you could respond with humor, because I think joy is diffusive. And I would say second is to respond with, I'm just trying to find where love is best served. I've responded that way a few times, and there's not a lot they can say to that.
There we go. Okay, I just want to add one thing to that, just in case what is being referred to is not necessarily, there's the outward question of, oh, you're a working mom. You're one of those moms. And also just the internal question you can do to yourself of like, well, should I be working? When those comments come up and it makes you doubt. And just looking at the diversity of beautiful families, I think. And knowing there's nowhere near one solution, one size fits all to families. And I there's families with 11 kids, and families with one child, and families with no children, and families who do this and do that, and homeschool and public school, and they're beautiful, and they're beautiful because their parents didn't build the family based on what other people thought the family should look like. They built based on what they felt God was calling to them in their family. So that's something that for me personally helps me not take those nasty comments to heart.
A lot of people have a lot of opinions, but the only one that matters is Jesus Christ, between you and him. So I'll just wrap it up with that. Do we have time for one more?
Sure. One more question. I saw this here, right there. Laura?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm currently going through a career transition, so really love that this event took place now. So my question is, just talking about Regina's thoughts on seasons, how have you adjusted, like when your kids are 0 to 3 versus like when they're in school, or if you find that you have a child that maybe is struggling more with the fact that you are working, because each child is different, like you said. What does some of that look like in your lives, to the extent that you can share? Thanks.
Sure. I'll start off by just saying an older mom once told me, expect that your family is going to look different every 6 months. And that was really helpful to have that mindset that I'm probably going to have to adjust schedules, routines. They're probably going to be changing every 6 months. They probably change a little more because of seasons going from summer to fall, etc. My oldest is 4, so Regina's oldest is 10, so you guys are more in the school age. But I think having the mindset that it's okay that things are going to change, because I like perfection. I like to just be like, okay, we got the formula down and this is how we're going to operate. And then you get pregnant and then you go through a job transition. And the Lord has called me to learn how to flow a lot more. I hate the term work-life balance. I'm happy it hasn't come up tonight. I much more like the term flow, the flow between life and work, because it allows for that integration a lot more. But Regina, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. It's never the same, right? And you know, for example, when I was talking earlier about trying to protect that time between 3 and 6 o'clock when the kids are home from school and dinner time, that's kind of a new thing for my family, just because my older ones now, my daughter's in 5th grade, my son's in 2nd grade. And I started seeing that shift, right? They need this time with mom. You know, my husband can't get off work that early. They need, you know, to kind of decompress from school, to talk about things, and this was going to be really my only time, because then the evening is like crazy. You're trying to get baths and dinner, and you know, so it's like, well, I have to protect this time, and if important work things are going on, then I kind of have to shift that, and as best as I can, you know, if there's an emergency, right? Sometimes those things don't work out the way you want them to, but you know, you're always evaluating. I think it's just like a constant. This is what we're doing today. You know, if at the moment one kid needs something else, you know, and then also just working together with my husband, right? This isn't my job. This is, you know, this is our family. This is him and I together. If he needs to pull back from work, that, you know, might need to happen.
I don't have older kids, so I feel like I don't know the balance, but I feel like relying on your husband in all seasons is good advice. We'll end with that.
Yeah, no, I think that's our conclusion. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight.
And please raise your hands for Elise Gallagher and Regina Bethencourt and Elizabeth Marcolini. Please join us out here for a little happy half hour. Elise will be signing some of her books, so if you're interested in purchasing them, you also get a marvelous Examine notebook for free. So a little bundle deal, and it's really quite lovely from the Catholic Women's Business. So join us again, and please, thank you so much for tonight.